Hey everyone, Cody Hayes here, and I'd like to welcome you to part 2 as we look at this lecture over rights, justice, and Aristotle's golden mean. And this is where we left off. We left off with, equal treatment for equals, which is often an elitist principle because who gets to determine, who would be considered an equal or what is an equal. So in a case to, make that equal, you have treat equals equally and treat unequals unequally. That those who are equals and those who are unequals will depend on what particular situation is going on. So to continue on, still with rights, have what's called negative rights. Well, negative rights is essentially, what should not be done to an individual by the government or the community, essentially non-interference, being left alone. When I think of negative rights, I think of an incident that happened a number of years ago. I'm not sure exactly how many years ago it has been, but it happened in Texas to a woman named Sandra Bland, who was arrested during a traffic stop and ended up dying in the jail there in Texas, wherever it took place in Texas. And a lot of the incident was recorded on the police dash cam. But I remember the website Vox asked a criminal defense attorney, to kind of explain the legal issues, with being pulled over and whatnot. And I remember he stated, it all goes back to the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. The Fourth Amendment basically states you have the right to be left alone. So, when you are stopped by the police, the officer has to tell you why they stopped you. Then the officer has to get the necessary information that he or she needs, driver's license, proof of insurance. Then the officer checks to make sure, there's no warrants out for your arrest or whatnot. And then the officer has to return with either the warning or the citation. And after that, the officer has no legal right to hold you. If he or she does, then the officer is in violation of your Fourth Amendment right. And the attorney stated that in the case of Sandra Bland, she failed what they call in their profession the attitude test. Now, he added there is no such thing as the attitude test. That while you should be respectful to others, there's no law that says you have to be. But in any case, an example of negative rights would be, the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution, right? That says, you have right to be left alone, non-interference. Then by contrast, you have positive rights. Well, positive rights is the notion of what should be given to the individual by the government or by the community. And let me have a quick sip of water, and I will, focus a little bit more here on positive rights. Well, when I think of positive rights, I think of the philosophical idea of socialism. And, what should the government or the community give individuals? And, certain things within socialism, such as public schools, public parks, healthcare or whatnot. That would be, example of positive rights. What should be given to the person by the government or by the community. Continuing on, we have here what's called the liberty limiting principle. Well, the liberty limiting principle is the notion that the government or the community has the right to pass laws which limit the freedom of its citizens. Liberty being a word relating here to, freedom. We often talk about, in the United States, the notion that we have, freedom, but we don't have freedom in the most, literal sense. We can't do whatever we want at any time. None of the 27 amendments to the United States Constitution are absolute. Like, for example, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater when there is no fire and then claim free speech under the First Amendment. It doesn't work that way. Or, also staying within the First Amendment, you can't torture somebody and then claim that your religious beliefs give you the right to do so and, use the First Amendment there, freedom of religion. Again, it doesn't work that way. We don't have anarchy in this country, which in many respects would be a type of literal freedom where everybody can do what we want. And then somebody else probably would be the one to stop, that, I guess you could say. But essentially, the government or the community has the right to pass laws that says, you're not going to behave in this manner. Another term is what's called the harm principle. Well, the harm principle is the notion that a government or a community, has the right to take away a person's or a group of individuals' freedom in order to stop them from causing harm to others. When I think of the harm principle, in many respects, I think of J.S. Mill, John Stuart Mill. And, he advocated a harm principle with the notion of the majority versus the minority, where he talked about, those that have a minority position, they are allowed to have that position. But if they try to take their position, whatever it may be, and enact harm on the majority, well, then the majority, whether it be the government or the community, they have the right to stop them and take away their freedoms, because this would involve, harming others. Another term, perhaps a bit very similar, legal paternalism. Well, legal paternalism is the notion that, the government or the community has the right to pass laws in order to save individuals from themselves. The first thing I think of with legal paternalism right now that just entered my mind is what critics would arguably refer to it as. They would refer to it probably as the nanny state. That, nanny comes in and gets to take away, the kid's fun. But it is a notion of, the government or the community passing laws to save people from themselves because essentially they can't control what's in their best interest, so the government has to step in and do that. And there was an incident, that happened not too long ago here in Springfield. I can't now think how many years it's been as I'm recording this, but I would say that certainly the enactment of the smoking ban around, public buildings, facilities is certainly a form of legal paternalism. And, I think of, articles I've read before in ethics regarding kind of this issue of basically passing laws to save smokers from themselves. And, on that subject, I will mention that, a lot of people I know that smoke, while they certainly voted against the ban, and when it was up for repeal, they voted, to have it repealed, although that failed. But some of them have mentioned to me before that I guess the best way to put it is, while they voted against it, in many respects, they like it as well. And the reason why, in thinking of this from legal paternalism, saving individuals from themselves, they smoke, yes, but they wish that they didn't. And of course, someone could say, well, then they can just quit. Well, it's not that simple. If they could just quit, then there wouldn't be, these products available to try to help smokers to quit if it was just like, flipping on and off a switch. And part of the reason, they do, say, they like it is, like I said, they smoke, but they wish they didn't. So it kind of, limits how often they would be, lighting one cigarette up from another. So, in any case, we will stop here, and then when we come back, we will move on into justice, and then we should get to a little bit there we have of Aristotle's golden mean. So, take care. I will symbolically see you then.